All right, welcome to GenXDC. This is the place where we talk about all things DC from a Generation X perspective. I'm producer Spencer from the WGTS 91.9 morning show with Jerry and Blanca, and I'm joined, as always, by.
I'm Dan Lucoda. I'm the former morning show producer at WMAL Radio. I worked with Harden Weaver. I worked with Tim Brandt and Andy Parks.
Mhm.
And I worked there from 1992 as the morning show producer until 2002.
Well, that's why with today's episode, you are the perfect person to have on the show. So we don't have to go get anybody. You are the person because you produced in my opinion, the best morning show in the history of Washington, D.C. and maybe the world, Harden and Weaver. Every morning I used to listen to them. We would wake up and they were two older guys. If you don't know who Harden and Weaver is, I suggest you go to YouTube and listen to them from the they started 1960.
1960, yep.
Go listen to them. I mean, they were hilarious, and I thought they were fun. They were hilarious. There's so many different things. They did characters, but I mean, they literally shaped my life,
Mm.
and really made me enjoy radio. But I want to hear from you. I want to hear more about Hardin and Weaver. Tell us some things.
The thing is, it's Frank Harden and Jackson Weaver.
Hmm.
Um, Jackson Weaver started out as, both started out in radio. Both Frank and Jack started out in radio. Jackson was
Right.
the announcer for Patsy Cline. So he would travel with Patsy Cline announcing. Frank was a announcer for different radio shows that would go through,
Okay.
like the Lone Ranger. He'd be doing things like that. So these two were ended up here in DC, and then were
Hmm.
paired together by Andy Ockershausen, famous, great guy, famous.
Yeah, I've seen his podcast. He has a really good podcast.
He's a hilarious guy, a smart guy. He's a really good person too. I like Andy a lot, and Janice, his wife, wonderful folks.
Mhm.
But they were put together, and it became magic. These guys just became magic on the air. They were doing things and creating, talking about subjects in a fun way for
Mhm.
their whole careers. And
Yeah.
Frank would say, both of them would agree to this, that the only controversial thing they would say in the morning was "Good morning." So when you have radio today, where everyone's got, especially the pop,
Everything's controversial, right?
it's going to be blue, it's red, it's pink, let's fight about it. They
Right.
didn't do any of that. They had
Mm-mm.
made fun of that, which was hilarious. So Frank was the straight guy, and
Uh-huh.
Jackson was the funny guy. So and that became magic. And when I got out of school, I went right into my job from Maryland, right
Uh-huh.
into producing their show. And coming out of Maryland, you think, okay, my training was you got to prepare, write out, you're scripting it,
Mhm.
you get your ideas on paper and what have you. Those two had nothing scripted. It was made up on the fly.
Wow.
And that's magic. To watch that happen, that's
Mhm.
magic. Oh, hilarious stuff. To this day, I still smile and crack up at some of the stuff they came up with on the
That is
fly.
that's amazing how talented. I mean, both of us being producers and being on morning shows. I mean, we know how difficult it is when you're prepared for things. When
Yes.
you're and that makes me think they must have. I mean, they were just so talented how they could just come up with that thing. But I just can't imagine just watching them in person.
The One time there was a story about um, short people being tossed. It was a
Okay.
some fair in some country
Right. Right.
where it was one of the exercises. You toss the shorter person,
Yeah.
or
Which
you
is
throw
not
it, and whoever got,
definitely not politically correct.
so whoever was thrown the
Yeah.
furthest would win the competition. I mean, crazy. And this
Hmm.
was, this is the 90s. This is around, this is
Right.
92 when I first started. So I brought the story in. We're kind of joking about it off air. And
Uh-huh.
Jackson looks at Frank and goes, "Lead me to it." So Frank's like, "Okay, gotcha." Kick the mics open, and Frank brings up the story, talks about it, and Frank goes, "What do you think, Jack?" Jackson goes, "I'm a shorter guy. I think you could throw me." So,
Oh no.
like, okay, all right, let's. So Jackson backs up a little bit, goes, "Okay, Frank, I'm up on your shoulders now." He's painting a picture. He hasn't left his chair. And Frank's like, "Okay, I got you." Frank's like making sounds. "Okay, I got. Oh, you're on my shoulders now." Okay. Jackson's like, "Okay, go ahead, give me a push." Boom. Engineer hits a sound effect of glass breaking, chairs, a big crashing sound. And Jackson, all he does is lean back in the chair and goes, Okay, everybody, I'm okay. I'm fine. Just brush me off. And it was like just to watch that happen in a matter of seconds and the way their brains were working and the connections, like, wow.
And I love. Tell us about some of the characters. I love the characters.
I'm trying to remember them all, but
Okay.
so there was a little
The
old.
senator.
Okay,
Okay.
you got the senator, and they
Got to
always
go with him first.
they did a march at 7:25
Mm-hmm.
in the morning, every morning, the march. And so the senator would lead off the march. Hey, oh, and off they, they'd play a
Yep.
John Philip Sousa march or what have you.
Uh-huh.
So you had the senator, of course, you had the little old lady.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love the little old lady.
This
Yes.
is Jackson Weaver doing all these voice impersonations.
Yep.
He sounded different too. It was great.
Uh-huh.
You had Dr. Willoughby.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Willoughby, he was like the psychologist, the kind of the
Right.
whole. Then you had Dr. Headcold. He was the medical doctor who was never correct at anything, but he tried. You had Bosco Osgood, which is one of my favorites.
Yes, I remember Bosco.
The reporter would be out in the field, completely missing the story,
Right.
completely not where he should be. And Frank would be like, "Oh, where are you? I'm over, but you're not supposed to be there." Great stuff. And then Larry, the orchestra conductor,
Mm-hmm.
which sounded like Lawrence Welk.
Yep.
And one time, Lawrence Welk actually called into the show. Now, this is before my
Really? Okay.
the show. If you don't know who Lawrence Welk is, look him up. Lawrence Welk called into a show, and he had an accent. I think he was Austrian or German. And he fantastic, stupid ladies who are dancing with the champagne ladies. And so Larry, the orchestra guy, kind of had the same kind of voice.
Okay.
And Frank said by the time they got done, he couldn't tell who Lawrence Welk was and Jackson Weaver was, because Jackson Weaver slipped into Larry the orchestra guy and was doing the accent right back at Lawrence Welk. Hilarious. But then they could get away with it.
So but see, as a kid, I fell for it. I mean, I thought it was really an old lady. I thought, this was a senator. I didn't realize that until the probably the mid 80s when I got older. That wait a minute, that sounds like Jackson right there.
And the really cool thing is, Jackson Weaver, the voice of Smokey Bear.
Yes, that's right. And I like how you said Smokey Bear, because when I was a kid, we used to say Smokey the Bear. That was the big thing. You'd go to the zoo because you could go see Smokey the Bear at the zoo. Yes. But I remember Harden Weaver saying, it's not Smokey the Bear, it's Smokey Bear. You wouldn't say, my name's Spencer White. I wouldn't say Spencer the White. That doesn't sound exactly right. So
Smokey Bear. And it's a cool story about the bear. If you don't know it, look it up.
Right.
National Park Service saved it after a fire. It got its paws burnt, but it was saved. And so, but Jackson Weaver became the voice of Smokey Bear on all the PSAs. And his pipes were amazing. Both Frank and Jack's pipes were amazing. I mean, I'm envious to this day how wonderful their voices were. But Jackson would kick down into, only you can prevent forest fires. Oh, and I'm not exaggerating. Almost every day I'd beg Jackson, do Smokey Bear.
Yes.
And he would do it. So Mike McKay. Oh, God rest his soul. A wonderful person there as well. Mike McKay was our engineer. And Mike would both Mike and I just go, oh, that is just so awesome.
And this makes me think about it. I mean, this is a little confession of mine, but when I have trouble sleeping, if there's ever a time that I can't get to sleep, I'll go to YouTube to their voices. I mean, because they're soothing to me. It's almost like going back to the womb, almost.
Something about them, and there was no ego.
No,
you have a lot of that today. In the arts, in the sense of like actors and radio people, what have you. There's egos out there.
Well, I got to tell you, as a kid, I always wanted to be a part of something like that. And I mean, to me, well, because Johnny Holiday, my favorite sports guy, was there. They had characters. Bud Steele do the news in the 70s and 80s, I guess. Bud Steele, but they had all these characters. I wanted to be part of that. And then they had people from throughout the day, like Tim Beatrice would stop by occasionally, or things like that. I always wanted to be part of a show like that in a radio station like that. I mean, every morning I thought about that.
Well, that was part of their magic.
Yep.
Because you as a listener were included into it.
Yes.
You were part of their family. And like I was saying, they had no egos, and they would do, you remember everything on the air. You'd have bake sales they would announce on the air.
Right.
Fairs, small town fairs, public service announcements for local bazaars and churches and Greek festivals, and you name it. They announced it all. They'd go to the fair, and I used to always crack up, but they'd cut the cheese at the fair.
Oh,
Literally,
I saw them. I saw them at an event one time. Yeah.
They would come out, cut giant wheel of cheese from like Wisconsin, and they would cut the cheese, and it was hilarious. But that was why they were, I think, so successful. Nothing was beyond. They were touchable. They were real. They weren't in a big ivory tower. Right. They were real. They were part of the community. They made very good money. You'd never have guessed because they lived like the rest of us do. And hilarious.
Right. And one of the things that I remember is that the Children's Hospital.
Yes.
They did every year. They did something with Children's Hospital.
That started out as they would do speaking engagements. They would do appearances. And so they do an appearance, and the person that they appeared for goes, "Who do I make the check out to?" And Jackson looks at Frank. Frank looks at Jackson. They're like, "We're okay." And Jackson had children. They both had children. Jackson had to go to the hospital with his children. So he goes, "Let's make it out to Children's Hospital." That started that.
Wow.
That started the whole. They never asked for money for Children's Hospital. It just became a thing that just happened. And
I associated them with Children's Hospital. And I remember going by Children's Hospital in DC. And when I saw it, I thought, that's the place, Harden Weaver. They really care about that hospital.
Yeah, and it was genuine. They did the golf tournament, 25 plus years of the golf tournament, Children's Hospital golf tournament. That was a blast, a lot of fun. Having those guys out there. And Frank was an avid golfer, loved to golf. So I played a lot of rounds of golf with Frank, which was a blast. He was hilarious.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
The jokes, it never ended. The jokes, he could, that radio voice and that radio ability to paint a picture. So when he tells you a joke, you're not just hearing it, you're seeing it, which was a blast. You'd miss a putt. Okay, Dan, you want just those things. Oh, it was so much fun. So much fun.
But the thing I'm hearing from you, which I love, I mean, that show was everything that I thought it was as a kid.
Absolutely.
That's that excites me, because that just is, it means so much to me, because so often you hear about, different people or shows, and they're not exactly how they are. But to hear this, I mean, it means so much to me.
They were, as you heard them on the air, that was them. That was them. I mean, when I started to work, I was an intern there at first. My last semester of college, I was an intern, and I'd pass them in the hallway. Or I'd go into the lunchroom, and they'd be sitting there, and they knew my name.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, how you doing, Dan?
Wow.
How you doing? Now you're at Maryland. I mean, they took a genuine interest in it. Like, okay, that's really cool. And I know you started out by saying they were old, older. You knew they were older guys, but I think that lended them to being endeared. They were wise. They were like sages. They
were like my grandfathers.
Yeah, and that only you can prevent forest fire.
All right, and with that, we have to say goodbye, and we want to hear from you. Let us know what you remember about Harden and Weaver. Maybe your favorite bit on the show. Were you a Senator fan? Were you a like me, Johnny Holiday? I literally have a recording from 1978 where I'm acting like I'm Johnny Holiday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because that's what that show meant to me. Well, we will see you on the next edition of GenXDC.